What happens when a future king says enough and rips away the very title that made Meghan Markle royalty? In a move no one saw coming, Prince William has officially stripped Meghan Markle of her royal titles, and sources say her reaction was nothing short of explosive. Behind closed doors in Montecito, reports of shouting, pacing, and panic are spilling into public view. Why now? What pushed William to act? And how did Meghan allegedly spiral the moment the letter arrived? This is not just a family feud. It's the final, brutal severing of royal ties. Stay with us as we uncover the dramatic moments, insider leaks, and what this means for the monarchy's future. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Under the piercing Californian sun, in the sprawling quiet of Montecito, a phone buzzed, its vibrations muffled beneath a polished marble countertop. On the other end of that call, tucked away behind the thick sandstone walls of Kensington Palace, was a voice Meghan Markle never expected to hear directly again, a senior aide speaking not on behalf of Prince William, but with his personal authority. The message delivered was as brief as it was shattering, effective immediately. All remaining royal designations previously associated with the Duchess of Sussex are hereby rescinded. This decision is final. No fanfare, no discussion, no offer of compromise. Just a final, cold decree that would change the course of royal modern history and, once again, send shockwaves through the British monarchy. This moment, the one insiders now refer to as the title severance, would become more than a royal footnote. It would become the day Prince William planted a flag in the ground, declared enough was enough, and officially closed the door on what many in the monarchy view as the most turbulent royal experiment of the modern era. Meghan Markle's rise and fall within the House of Windsor. But to truly understand the fury, the breakdown, and the fallout that followed, we must rewind. We must go back to when this fire was first sparked. It started with a love story, one that captivated the world. Meghan Markle, an American actress known for her role on the television show Suits, stepped onto the global stage not just as Prince Harry's partner, but as a bold, biracial woman who was expected to help revolutionize an ancient institution. She was articulate, charismatic, and different in all the ways the British press found irresistible and, eventually, intolerable. The fairy tale began with promise. It ended in lawsuits, Netflix deals, media wars, and now absolute severance. And it was Prince William, not King Charles, who brought the hammer down. The question on everyone's mind is simple but chilling. What pushed William to this point? In the months leading up to the decision, subtle changes had begun emerging from Kensington. Sources close to the royal household described a new firmness in William's demeanor. The once mild, diplomatic future king had begun issuing short, curt instructions. Royal insiders whispered about a man burdened not only by duty, but by betrayal of trust, of institution, and of family. According to one anonymous aide, William had grown tired of being portrayed as the silent villain in Harry and Meghan's narrative. The Oprah interview, the Netflix docuseries, the podcast Shade, the endless headlines claiming racism, jealousy, exclusion, all directed subtly or explicitly toward him and his wife, Princess Catherine. It wasn't just personal. It was reputational. William reportedly believed Meghan's repeated use of her royal connection in public and commercial ventures wasn't just a nuisance, it was a strategic weapon. Every time she referenced being a duchess or mentioned royal life, it kept the wounds open. And for William, a man now being groomed to lead an entire institution, those wounds bled across the very fabric of British society. He'd had enough. This was not a decision made in isolation. Sources claim William spent months weighing his options, consulting his grandmother's old notes, speaking privately with Queen Camilla and Princess and two women known for their uncompromising views on royal protocol. King Charles, still publicly holding on to the idea of reconciliation, reportedly advised caution. But caution wasn't what the monarchy needed now, William believed. It needed resolve, finality, strength. So he did what no one else dared. He ordered the full removal of Meghan Markle's remaining royal titles. No more Duchess of Sussex in formal engagements, no more use of the HRH styling even in absentia. According to a senior legal official tied to the royal household, the order was crafted with deliberate legal force, ensuring no opportunity for public reversal. When the news reached Meghan, those present say she exploded. Not theatrically, not in a controlled display of disappointment, but viscerally. One Montecito insider described her reaction as horrific and hysterical, claiming she broke down screaming into a pillow before calling her legal team within the hour. Another says she kept pacing her private office, muttering, "He can't do this. He doesn't have the right." But he did. And he had. Even Prince Harry was reportedly caught off guard. While he had been warned in private correspondence that a formal move was being considered, he had allegedly believed there was still time to negotiate. But William had seen enough delays. To him, every interview, every tell-all, every silent brand collaboration that leaned on Meghan's royal status was an affront. Not just to tradition, but to the crown his children would one day inherit. The timing was also strategic. With King Charles facing health concerns and the monarchy trying to rebuild its public standing following years of scandal, from Prince Andrew's disgrace to the Queen's death to Harry and Meghan's steady stream of accusations, William chose a moment when he knew firm leadership would be applauded rather than questioned. And firm it was. The official statement released by Kensington Palace was cold, calculated, and unmistakably final, in accordance with established royal procedures and in defense of the integrity of the crown. The titles and styles associated with the Duchess of Sussex are to be considered null in all official contexts moving forward. There was no tribute, no expression of gratitude for past service. Just erasure. But the consequences were not just administrative. They were deeply emotional. Meghan had built a post-royal brand on the duality of her identity. The American underdog who dared to challenge a 1,000-year-old monarchy. Her Duchess title wasn't just symbolic, it was currency. She used it in book deals, on red carpets, and even in public speeches at charity events. Without it, what remained was simply Meghan Markle, former actress, public figure, mother, and wife of the spare prince. To Meghan, it felt like an assassination of character by the very family that had once welcomed her with open arms, or at least pretended to. Yet for the palace, it was survival. The introduction of this story is not just about a royal demotion. It is about power. It is about reputation. It is about how far a future king is willing to go to protect the throne, even if it means tearing down his own brother's world in the process. As this video continues, we'll explore the chilling deliberations behind the scenes, the full scale of Meghan's furious reaction, Harry's impossible position, and how this one decision could change the royal family forever. Because when titles fall, so do illusions. And what's left behind may be the truth the monarchy has feared most. The transformation didn't happen overnight. For much of his life, Prince William was known as the calmer brother, the reserved one, the stabilizer amid royal chaos. Where Prince Harry brought emotion, rebellion, and unpredictability, William brought steadiness. He was trained from birth to one day become king, and every public appearance, every speech, every carefully chosen word was polished to reflect this inevitability. But something changed in the last few years. Something began shifting beneath that composed exterior. Behind the palace walls, aides began noticing a colder resolve taking root in the heir to the throne. As the years wore on following the infamous Megxit, William reportedly began keeping mental tabs on every damaging headline, every accusation, every moment he believed the institution had been undermined by Harry and Meghan. Sources say he watched the Oprah interview in silence, jaw clenched, eyes unmoving. He listened as Meghan discussed her isolation, her mistreatment, and the suggestion that unnamed royals questioned her child's skin tone. Then he heard Harry defend those claims with passive agreement. To many viewers, it was a bombshell. To William, it was betrayal. Private matters were being aired to the world, and worse, he believed the story was being told with deliberate manipulation. At the time, Buckingham Palace responded with its famous line, "Recollections may vary." But for William, the recollections weren't the issue. It was the deliberate, repeated erosion of the monarchy's reputation in the media. He viewed it as a public execution by a couple who had chosen to walk away, but refused to stop feeding off the very institution they claimed to despise. It wasn't just the interview that struck him, it was what came after. The Netflix documentary was a turning point. William, who had long kept his distance from celebrity platforms, was reportedly appalled by the way his brother and Meghan recounted their royal experiences while integrating private footage, confidential correspondence, and even veiled implications that he and Princess Catherine were cold, unwelcoming, or jealous. William allegedly felt as though he and his wife were being turned into scapegoats for Meghan's disillusionment with royal life. He believed Harry had gone from being misled to becoming complicit. One former palace advisor, who worked closely with William during this period, said the prince began holding regular, private meetings at Kensington Palace to address the Harry and Meghan issue directly. These weren't ceremonial check-ins. They were strategic planning sessions. William wanted a long-term solution to what he saw as a reputational crisis. The question that loomed in every meeting: how do you preserve the monarchy while being attacked from within? At first, the thinking was to do nothing publicly. Let Harry and Meghan speak, allow their popularity to fade over time, and focus instead on the good work of the core royal family. But the situation only escalated. Each time the Sussexes appeared in a public interview, a new accusation surfaced. Meghan reportedly claimed she was offered no support for her mental health. Harry suggested his father stop taking his calls. Meghan accused palace aides of protecting others while refusing to defend her. Harry all but confirmed that royal racism had a role in driving them out. And with each episode, William became more and more resolute. He began by revisiting the idea of a modern monarchy, one that could evolve while still respecting tradition. He believed, insiders claim, that the royals couldn't keep one foot in the 20th century and another in the world of Hollywood deals, social justice campaigns, and podcast celebrity. It was either a monarchy or a media brand, not both. And that meant making hard decisions, especially about those who were trying to blur that line. The Queen's passing only made the situation more urgent. With King Charles now officially on the throne, and with the world watching how the monarchy would reorient itself post-Elizabeth, William began quietly crafting what insiders called the Windsor Doctrine. It was an internal set of guiding principles that centered around three ideas: protect the throne, restore dignity, and eliminate distractions. It was during these months that William reportedly began taking notes from Princess Anne, a figure within the royal family long admired for her discretion, loyalty, and absolute lack of interest in celebrity. Anne's belief had always been simple: if you don't like the system, don't be part of it. But if you're part of it, you serve it. Period. William found that mentality refreshing, even grounding. As one close source revealed, and reminded him what royalty actually means. Not interviews. Not emotional confessionals. Service. He also took inspiration from the late Queen Elizabeth herself. She never publicly criticized Harry and Meghan, but she also never gave them space to define the narrative unchecked. In private, she reportedly confided in close advisors that Meghan never truly grasped what royal life required, that it was not fame, but restraint, that defined a monarch. Armed with these influences, William decided it was time to act. The idea of title removal was floated early on, but it was controversial. Removing a title isn't just symbolic, it's political. It sends a message not only to the individual but to the world. For months, William sat on the idea, waiting for the moment that would justify it fully. That moment came after Meghan's speech at the Women of Vision Awards. On stage in New York, wearing a glittering gold gown, she accepted her award and gave a heartfelt speech about breaking barriers, female empowerment, and rising above systemic challenges. But what angered William wasn't the speech, it was the branding. The invitation used her full title, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. The event press release did the same. The title wasn't just being retained, it was being commercialized. Again, to William, it was the final straw. Meghan had left the royal family, criticized it at every turn, and yet continued to wrap herself in the prestige of the institution she had rejected. It was hypocrisy, and worse, it was damaging. He called a meeting with King Charles and Camilla at Clarence House. The discussion lasted 2 hours, sources say, and the atmosphere was tense. Charles was hesitant. He feared the backlash. Camilla reportedly supported the move but warned it had to be handled with absolute legal clarity. William didn't waver. He had already spoken with royal legal advisors. The paperwork was ready. A week later, the official order was signed. Not only was Meghan's right to be styled as Her Royal Highness revoked permanently, but the usage of the Duchess of Sussex in professional or media-related contexts would no longer be sanctioned. The title would remain in ceremonial form for historical purposes but stripped of public function or endorsement. It was more than a formality. It was a message. The monarchy was no longer playing defense. William, who had grown up watching the institution endure wave after wave of scandal, from Diana's tapes to Charles's phone calls, from Andrew's downfall to Harry's defection, was now determined to lead differently. He saw the modern world as a battlefield for narratives, and the palace could no longer afford to let Meghan and Harry control the narrative unchallenged. This decision wasn't about revenge. At least, that's how William justified it. It was about clarity. The monarchy, he believed, could not survive with ambiguity. And Meghan had become the living embodiment of that ambiguity. Part royal, part rebel, both insider and outsider. It had to end. So he ended it. What followed was chaos in California, fury in the media, and stunned silence from Harry. But for William, it was a long time coming. This chapter marks a clear departure from the monarchy's passive responses of the past. It shows a future king stepping into a role not just as a symbolic figure, but as a tactical leader, one willing to act decisively in the face of internal threat. Because for Prince William, this was never just about Meghan. It was about the monarchy's survival. And survival, as history shows, often demands sacrifice. Royal titles are more than ceremonial labels. They are not simply decorative flourishes tacked onto the names of aristocrats and monarchs. In the British monarchy, a title conveys power, lineage, rank, and access. It shapes the way individuals are introduced, treated in diplomatic circles, and referenced in the public eye. But more critically, a title carries institutional weight, anchoring the bearer within a 1,000-year-old system of protocol, privilege, and deeply protected tradition. So when Meghan Markle was stripped of her title by order of Prince William, it wasn't just a personal insult or an administrative tweak. It was a deliberate message, one that reverberated across media outlets, royal watchers, legal circles, and cultural commentators. The decision tapped into a question that had been quietly bubbling under the surface for years. What do royal titles actually mean in the modern age? And why was Meghan so controversial? To understand this, one must look at how the British peerage system functions. Titles within the monarchy fall into a structured hierarchy. At the top is the sovereign, the king or queen, followed by various royal dukes, marquises, earls, viscounts, and barons. The titles aren't simply honorary. They often come with designated lands, heraldry, historic responsibilities, and in some cases, seats in the House of Lords, though these have become less politically significant in the modern era. When Meghan married Prince Harry in 2018, Queen Elizabeth II bestowed upon the couple the titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex. This wasn't a passive gesture. The Queen was signaling institutional acceptance, integrating Meghan into the royal fold as a full-fledged member with responsibilities and expectations. The title, Duchess of Sussex, hadn't been widely used since the 19th century, which made the choice both historic and symbolic. Meghan was meant to represent a new chapter, a royal bridge to modernity. But within months of marriage, cracks began to show. Reports of behind-the-scenes tensions, accusations of Meghan clashing with palace staff, and tabloid scrutiny intensified. Still, the titles remained intact. The couple retained the use of their royal highnesses and continued representing the crown in official engagements, albeit with growing unease. Then came Megxit, the seismic announcement in January 2020 that Harry and Meghan would be stepping back from their roles as senior royals. The statement, released via Instagram, shocked the world and reportedly blindsided the palace. It began an unprecedented negotiation between the Sussexes and the Crown, culminating in the Sandringham Summit, where Queen Elizabeth met with Prince Charles, William, and Harry to hash out the future. The compromise was firm. Harry and Meghan would retain their Duke and Duchess titles, but could no longer use HRH, Her Royal Highness, in any official capacity. In the eyes of the monarchy, this was an elegant way to preserve dignity while drawing clear boundaries. But to the couple, it was the first sign of institutional resistance. What followed was a contradiction that would define the next 3 years. Meghan, no longer a working royal, continued using the title Duchess of Sussex in public appearances, interviews, podcasts, and branding. While technically permitted, the palace viewed this with increasing discomfort. A line had been drawn, they had left official duty, but the titles continued appearing in a commercial context. This precedent mattered to Prince William. As he considered what to do about Meghan's ongoing public role, he reportedly reviewed these cases in depth. Royal aides briefed him on the legal implications, historical fallout, and public reactions from prior title removals. The conclusion was sobering but firm. If the monarchy wanted to draw a clear line between duty and branding, this was the moment. What also fueled William's decision was the impact on public perception. Polls in the UK had begun showing growing fatigue over the Sussex versus Palace saga. Support for Meghan had waned, particularly after multiple interviews and media ventures appeared to profit off royal drama. Among older generations, the title usage was viewed as disingenuous. Among younger audiences, some saw it as a savvy move. But within the institution, it was seen as a constitutional headache. Royal titles are granted under the sovereign's prerogative and traditionally remain unless specifically revoked by the monarch or an act of parliament. In Meghan's case, there was no crime or misconduct, which made the removal complex. William's move, therefore, was procedural and administrative, not punitive, but strategic. By issuing a directive that forbade the use of the title in any formal or public capacity, he drew a new boundary. One that said, "We no longer recognize this title in practice, even if it exists in name." The result was immediate media frenzy. Supporters of Meghan claimed it was misogynistic, retaliatory, and racially motivated. Critics applauded William for finally protecting the crown. In political circles, it reignited debates about the relevance of the monarchy itself. Should titles be hereditary at all? Should they hold any influence in a modern democracy? For William, however, this was not a debate about structure. It was about optics and legacy. The monarchy had already endured damage from scandals, divorces, and tabloid wars. Allowing former royals to keep trading on titles while criticizing the institution wasn't sustainable. He needed to end the ambiguity. In a private memo drafted by Kensington Palace lawyers, the logic was spelled out plainly. The continued public use of royal titles by individuals no longer representing the monarchy presents reputational, constitutional, and symbolic concerns. It is advised that such usage be formally discouraged, with enforcement where appropriate. This wasn't about silencing Meghan. It was about neutralizing the confusion her dual status created. Was she an outsider or an insider? A critic or a contributor? A duchess or an entrepreneur? Titles are meant to clarify status. But in Meghan's case, they had become a lightning rod for confusion. To the royal family, this episode serves as a cautionary tale. When lines between duty and celebrity blur, tradition suffers. William's bold move may not erase the years of public tension, but it set a new precedent, one that will likely echo in future decisions about royal roles, post-abdication identities, and how the crown defends itself in the era of social media and streaming platforms. The question remains, did stripping Meghan of her title diminish her or free her? Was it the monarchy's last attempt to protect its brand, or a deeper acknowledgement that it was too late? Time will tell. But for now, the title that once symbolized unity between a prince and an outsider has become a casualty in a quiet but ruthless war over image, control, and the future of the British monarchy. From the moment Meghan Markle stepped into the public eye as Prince Harry's partner, it was clear that she was not a conventional royal. Her poise, confidence, and history in Hollywood set her apart from the traditional image of women marrying into the British royal family. She was a self-made woman, a successful actress with a passion for humanitarian causes and a global voice for gender equality. On paper, she was a breath of fresh air. But in practice, the very traits that made Meghan stand out became the center of mounting friction between her public persona and palace expectations. The British monarchy has long operated on a framework of invisibility, ironically, while being one of the most visible institutions in the world. Royals are trained to be present but not provocative, admired but not opinionated, dignified but not disruptive. The phrase, "never complain, never explain," wasn't just a tradition, it was a survival strategy. But Meghan's style clashed with this doctrine almost immediately. Before marrying Harry, Meghan was known for her lifestyle blog The Tig, where she shared everything from recipes and travel tips to reflections on self-love and empowerment. She was active on Instagram and accustomed to being her own brand manager. In the world of television, red carpets, and philanthropic panels, Meghan had learned to build and control her narrative. But palace protocol demanded something far different, a submission of individual identity in favor of institutional representation. That tension manifested quickly. During her first official royal engagements, Meghan dazzled the public with her speeches and fashion. But internally, palace aides grew uneasy. There were reports that Meghan often veered from carefully scripted lines. On one tour, she allegedly addressed issues of gender equality in a way that raised eyebrows among senior officials. It wasn't the content that concerned them, it was the spontaneity. In the royal machine, every word is vetted, timed, and balanced to prevent diplomatic fallout. Meghan's instinct to speak freely, though inspiring to many, was seen as a liability by those tasked with protecting the crown's image. One staffer reportedly said, "She's trying to be Michelle Obama in an institution built for stoicism." That remark encapsulates the broader issue: Meghan's star power, her charisma, her activism, Her accessibility was built for modern celebrity culture, not centuries-old monarchy. Palace insiders claimed Meghan had difficulty adjusting to the hierarchical structure. She allegedly bypassed channels, gave direct orders to staff, and challenged traditions she found outdated. Meghan, for her part, felt she was simply bringing modern efficiency and emotional intelligence to a rigid system. But to the staff accustomed to deference and careful tradition, it felt like disruption. One infamous example was the debate over protocol during the lead-up to her wedding. Reports emerged that Meghan clashed with designers and royal aides over Princess Charlotte's bridesmaid dress. The details remain murky, but conflicting accounts from Meghan and Catherine sparked media speculation. Meghan said she was the one brought to tears, while sources from inside Kensington claimed the opposite. Regardless of the truth, the public perception was cemented. Meghan was difficult, demanding, and unwilling to bow to royal norms. It didn't help that Meghan's fame outside the royal bubble continued to grow. Unlike Catherine, who entered royal life largely unknown to the public and gradually cultivated a dignified, silent strength, Meghan had already cultivated a voice, one that she wasn't willing to relinquish. That decision placed her in direct conflict with the palace's preference for neutrality. The friction came to a head with the Sussexes' 2019 Africa tour. Meghan gave a candid interview with journalist Tom Bradby, in which she tearfully admitted she was not okay and suggested that few had asked about her well-being. It was a powerful moment of vulnerability, but one that reportedly shocked palace staff and infuriated William and Charles. For them, the tour was supposed to reinforce royal unity and goodwill. Meghan's emotional honesty, though lauded by many in the press, was seen within the palace as breaking rank, revealing internal fractures to a global audience. But while Meghan's public image soared in progressive and celebrity circles, her actions further alienated her from royal traditionalists. Royal duties are often repetitive, ceremonial, and deliberately apolitical. For someone used to measurable outcomes and direct action, this could feel frustrating. Meghan wanted to change the world. The palace wanted her to stand silently at the side of dignitaries while waving at cameras. The tension deepened after Megxit. Once outside the confines of royal life, Meghan became more expressive. The couple's Oprah interview was a defining moment in that transformation. Meghan described her isolation, her mental health struggles, and the lack of support she received. She discussed suicidal thoughts and hinted at racism within the royal family. The disclosures were raw and explosive. They garnered worldwide empathy, but they obliterated any chance of reconciliation in the near term. For the palace, Meghan had violated the unspoken agreement that royals do not attack the institution from which they derive their status. To her, however, it was a survival story, one she had every right to tell. Even after leaving royal duties, Meghan continued to present herself with the trappings of royalty. She signed multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify. She launched the Archwell Foundation and began appearing at high-profile events like the UN and the Women of Vision Awards. At each of these, her introduction often included the title Duchess of Sussex. The title gave her work prestige and access. But it also became a lightning rod for critics who felt she was leveraging royal clout without contributing to royal service. This is where the divide between persona and protocol becomes most obvious. Meghan views her title as part of her identity. To her, it represents marriage, motherhood, and a cultural breakthrough. But to the palace, and increasingly to William, it represents duty, rules, and lineage. Without those, the title becomes little more than branding. Royal historian Dr. Catherine Mayer summed it up best in a televised panel. Meghan is navigating two incompatible systems, celebrity and monarchy. In one, visibility is power. In the other, invisibility is strategy. The moment she chose visibility, she forfeited the protection of the institution. This incompatibility was never more visible than in public perception. In the US, Meghan was hailed as a bold voice. In the UK, many saw her as manipulative or disingenuous. The same interviews that earned her sympathy in Los Angeles sparked outrage in London. Tabloid culture amplified the conflict, but the fundamental divide was real. Perhaps the ultimate irony is that both Meghan and the monarchy were trying to protect their respective images. Meghan wanted to define herself outside of the royal shadow, but also needed the royal identity to open doors. The monarchy wanted to maintain its traditions without being dragged into modern controversies. Neither side was willing or able to fully let go of the other. Prince William, after years of observing the dual identity Meghan had crafted, decided the monarchy could no longer afford to accommodate both. The more she leaned into her celebrity persona, the more the palace saw her title as a threat, not a tribute. In that sense, Meghan's public persona and palace protocol weren't just in conflict, they were mutually destructive. The more she spoke, the more the monarchy retreated. The more the monarchy resisted, the more she became emboldened. And in the end, something had to break. The title, then, became the symbol of that unresolved tension. It was a crown she no longer served but refused to remove. By stripping the title, William didn't just draw a legal or procedural boundary, he ended the illusion that Meghan could ever straddle both worlds. From this point forward, there would be no half-in, half-out status. The palace had chosen protocol over personality. And Meghan, no longer bound by royal rules, would soon make it clear she wasn't done speaking. Inside the royal institution, the most pivotal decisions are rarely made in public. They unfold quietly, behind closed doors, in ornate sitting rooms and private offices, often under layers of formality and tradition. And it was in these very places, far from the eyes of the public and the scrutiny of the media, that Prince William's growing frustration with Meghan Markle began to evolve from silent resentment into decisive action. According to those closest to him, William's descent into exasperation wasn't sudden. It was slow and seething, accumulating over years. While the outside world consumed the drama between the Sussexes and the rest of the royal family through headlines and documentaries, inside Kensington Palace, the reality was more personal and far more painful. For William, this wasn't about image alone. It was about betrayal. It was about the deep sense that someone once welcomed into the family as a symbol of modernity had turned into a liability that threatened the very foundations of the monarchy. Sources describe early attempts by William to keep the peace. In the weeks following Harry and Meghan's wedding in 2018, he reportedly held several private dinners with Harry to smooth tensions that were already surfacing between Meghan and palace aides. William had long assumed the role of mediator between his brother and the institution, a quiet diplomat who understood the importance of unity in the face of public scrutiny. But these meetings often ended in frustration. William, accustomed to the language of discretion and compromise, reportedly found Meghan's sense of urgency and demand for change abrasive. What disturbed him most, insiders say, was how quickly Harry began to adopt Meghan's disillusionment. In William's view, Harry had gone from a trusted if rebellious partner in the royal machine to a man on the defensive, hypersensitive, and unwilling to hear any critique of his wife. Every disagreement was perceived as a slight. Every effort to maintain tradition was treated as an attack. By the time of the Sussexes' exit from royal duties in early 2020, William had reached a personal limit. The departure had not only blindsided the palace, but fractured his bond with Harry. What had once been a sibling relationship grounded in shared trauma, losing their mother, Diana, had now become a strained exchange of formality and barely concealed hostility. William's anger was not loud or dramatic. It was internalized. It hardened his approach to leadership. Behind closed doors, he began adopting a more assertive role in palace strategy. Those familiar with his operations during this period describe a noticeable change. He no longer asked for consensus on every decision. He began issuing clear directives. Staff described his tone as measured but final. There was no more space for ambiguity, especially where Harry and Meghan were concerned. The turning point came in 2022, following Queen Elizabeth II's death. As the new Prince of Wales, William assumed even greater responsibilities. With King Charles's health becoming an increasingly sensitive topic within royal circles, William's role expanded quickly, both ceremonially and administratively. And with this elevation came the power to influence long-term institutional policy. He began attending more private briefings with royal legal advisors. Discussions were held regarding the proper use of titles, branding boundaries, and the emerging challenges of maintaining royal credibility in the age of digital media. The name Meghan Markle came up often, usually in the context of reputational risk. From book releases to podcast interviews, Meghan's presence in the media was a constant thorn in the side of those attempting to re-establish public faith in the royal brand. According to one courtier, William was incensed when he saw promotional material for Meghan's podcast, Archetypes, prominently featuring her royal title. He reportedly asked, "How can someone tear the family down on Monday and sell herself as a duchess on Friday?" It was not just about content, it was about consistency. William believed the royal family was being held hostage by a former member who refused to let go of the very identity she had denounced. Still, Charles remained hesitant. The king, by nature and age, preferred reconciliation. Having weathered decades of scandal and embarrassment, from Diana's interviews to Camilla's early infamy, Charles leaned toward caution. He hoped time would ease the feud, and that Harry and Meghan might one day return to the fold in some capacity. William, however, had stopped believing in that fantasy. He viewed each public move made by Meghan and Harry as a calculated attempt to stay relevant by referencing their royal ties. Whether it was a well-timed Netflix series or a comment in a magazine article, William saw a pattern. And in his private office, he started tracking it. According to two palace insiders, William kept a confidential dossier that documented each major public appearance or statement made by the Sussexes referencing royal life, particularly those involving their titles. It wasn't about revenge. It was about building a case. That case came to a head after Meghan's attendance at the Women of Vision Awards in May 2023. Her speech, delivered with passion and received with applause, was widely celebrated. But to William, the entire event felt orchestrated to reassert Meghan's status as a royal figure. Her title was used in press releases, the Sussex coat of arms appeared on event materials, and she made a pointed reference to the strength it took to speak truth to power. William reportedly felt the entire affair was a not-so-subtle indictment of the monarchy. After that, William called a series of high-level meetings. Over the course of 3 weeks, legal teams, senior advisors, and members of the Privy Council were summoned to discuss one topic: what could be done to stop the misuse of royal titles. Unlike previous conversations that had ended in hesitancy, this time William made clear he wanted action, and he wasn't interested in further debate. The atmosphere in these meetings was described as unusually tense. William, normally calm and deliberative, was said to be direct, even stern. He made his expectations known. The Sussex situation needed to be resolved permanently. The monarchy could no longer afford to appear passive or indecisive. One aide present in the final round of meetings recalled a particularly sharp comment from William: "You cannot insult the crown and continue to profit from it. That ends now." What followed was a deliberate and tightly controlled process. Letters were drafted. Legal language was refined. Palace spokespeople were briefed in case of leaks. William personally reviewed the statements. And when the time came, he signed off on the directive. Meghan Markle was no longer to use the title Duchess of Sussex in any professional, commercial, or public-facing capacity. The move was unprecedented in modern royal history, not for its legality, but for its clarity. It was a message not just to Meghan, but to anyone who might think the monarchy was incapable of defending itself. The crown, long accused of being outdated and slow-moving, had acted swiftly, and William was now at its helm. Not everyone in the palace agreed with the timing. Some worried it would reignite public sympathy for Meghan. Others feared Harry would retaliate with another media blitz. But William didn't flinch. As far as he was concerned, the damage had already been done. The only thing left was to set the boundary and enforce it. Behind the scenes, he also consulted with key allies. Princess and reportedly backed him fully. Camilla, while cautious, understood the need for institutional protection. Even Prince Edward, typically quiet on such matters, is said to have voiced support for the move privately. The consensus among senior royals was that something had to be done. William simply had the resolve to do it. When the directive was delivered to Meghan's legal team, the reaction was immediate and intense. Reports indicate that multiple emergency calls were placed between Montecito and several media advisors. Meghan, caught off guard by the finality of the message, was reportedly furious. But by then, the decision had been made. There would be no negotiations. Behind closed doors, the monarchy had evolved. The passive posture of past scandals was gone. In its place was a new structure, tighter, more assertive, and led by a man who understood that survival, in the modern world, required not just legacy but leadership. William's frustration had reached its peak, and instead of imploding quietly, he had chosen to weaponize it, to reshape the way the monarchy would move forward. What began as internal irritation had become a royal doctrine. Titles were earned, not exploited. And Meghan Markle, once celebrated as a symbol of a new royal era, had become the cautionary tale William used to define the old one's limits. In royal affairs, almost everything begins or ends with a letter. Not a call, not a tweet, not a statement posted on Instagram, but a physical, carefully worded, signature-stamped letter on embossed royal stationery. It is the monarchy's oldest and most deliberate form of communication, one designed to be as formal as it is final. So when Meghan Markle's legal team received the letter from Kensington Palace, it wasn't just a procedural update. It was a declaration. The envelope arrived in silence. There was no advance warning, no friendly heads-up, no discreet conversation to soften the blow. It was delivered through official channels, marked for legal counsel only, with a royal seal bearing the crest of the Prince of Wales. The contents, though concise, carried the full force of 1,000 years of royal structure and protocol. In just 3 paragraphs, the letter laid out what many had suspected was coming for months. Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, was formally instructed to cease all use of the title in public, commercial, or promotional capacities. It reiterated that while the title remained in ceremonial context due to her marriage to Prince Harry, the Crown would no longer recognize or endorse any deployment of the styling outside of internal, historical references. The wording was deliberate and tight. The legal phrasing left no room for interpretation. The message was not only clear but final. Meghan Markle was no longer to be referred to as the Duchess of Sussex in the eyes of the institution. The reaction inside Montecito was immediate and explosive. According to sources close to Meghan's camp, she was pacing the room within minutes of reading the letter. Her first instinct was disbelief, then fury. Reports indicate that she shouted, "He can't do this. It's not his right," multiple times, directing her anger toward Prince William. She immediately summoned her legal advisors and media consultants to analyze the ramifications. Could they challenge it? Would this affect her contractual agreements? How would it be framed in the press? Her team was stunned. The timing, the delivery, the zero room for discussion. It all signaled a level of assertiveness from William they had underestimated. Meghan reportedly feared this was only the beginning, that other revocations or public humiliations might follow. One insider said she described the letter as a public execution disguised as stationery. But to understand the significance of the letter, one must understand what these titles represent on paper. Royal titles, while steeped in tradition, are managed by both constitutional law and royal prerogative. They are not personal property. They are institutional recognitions issued and enforced under the authority of the reigning monarch, or in this case, the Prince of Wales acting with delegated oversight. The letter made reference to Clause 17b, a rarely discussed but binding principle within internal royal policy. It states that titles granted under royal warrant may be subject to limitation, suspension, or conditional usage if deemed inconsistent with the dignity of the crown. Legal analysts suggest that this clause gave William the precedent he needed. While he didn't legally strip the title from Meghan in full, a process which would require more public action, he effectively suspended its practical use. The document also included a paragraph directed toward third-party organizations requesting that any event, broadcast, or publication refrain from introducing or promoting Meghan under her Duchess title. This caught her media team off guard. It meant that any promotional materials listing her as a Duchess could now be considered in defiance of the Crown's directive, risking legal rebuke or public correction from royal officials. In Montecito, the tone quickly shifted from anger to crisis management. Meghan's representatives began reaching out to various partners, Netflix, publishers, branding agencies, to review existing agreements. Many had been framed around her identity as the Duchess of Sussex. Would this change breach existing contracts? Would it cause her to lose influence or market value? The panic was real. Meanwhile, in London, the palace remained silent. There were no public announcements, no statements released to the press. The strategy was clear: let the letter speak for itself. It would eventually leak, and when it did, the message would carry greater weight because it came not from tabloids, but from official paper trail. That leak came within 72 hours. A senior royal correspondent broke the story in a Sunday edition of a major British newspaper. The headline read, "Exclusive, Meghan ordered to drop Duchess title by palace legal directive." The article cited sources close to Kensington and included a near-verbatim excerpt from the letter, confirming its authenticity. Public reaction was swift and polarized. Supporters of Meghan cried foul, accusing the palace of bullying. Critics of Meghan applauded William for taking a stand. What made the situation more volatile was that the letter referenced repeated and ongoing concerns regarding the public use of titles in commercial contexts, a veiled reference to Meghan's podcast deals, charity appearances, and media work. Though no specific incidents were named, The implication was unmistakable. Meghan had crossed a line, and the Crown had decided to push back. Back in Montecito, the discussion reportedly turned toward countermeasures. Meghan and her team considered releasing their own version of the letter, annotated and paired with a legal rebuttal. But advisors warned that doing so might escalate the conflict in a way that could damage her brand further. The consensus: play the victim publicly, but do not engage directly with the palace's terms. Harry's reaction to the letter remains a matter of speculation. Some insiders claim he was blindsided by the delivery and quietly furious with his brother. Others suggest he had been warned days prior but hoped the order would be delayed or softened. Either way, he found himself again caught between two worlds: the royal family he once belonged to, and the new life he was trying to build with Meghan. But the most telling reaction came from within the palace itself. After the letter was issued, Prince William reportedly told aides, "That's done. No follow-ups. No press spin. We move forward." That remark illustrates just how final the letter was meant to be. It wasn't an invitation to negotiate. It wasn't a public relations tactic. It was a line in the sand. Legal scholars and royal historians have since debated whether William's move sets a dangerous precedent or reinforces royal discipline. Some argue that royal titles, once given, should remain untouched unless tied to criminality or constitutional crisis. Others insist that the monarchy must adapt to the age of information, branding, and media manipulation, and protect itself accordingly. What everyone agrees on is this: the letter represents a dramatic evolution in how the royal family handles internal disputes. No longer reliant on veiled statements or backroom whispers, the institution has embraced formal, legalistic measures to maintain its image and authority. Meghan, once seen as an unstoppable media force, had just been served notice that the monarchy would no longer remain passive. And for William, this letter was more than a disciplinary tool. It was a statement of leadership, a sign that he was no longer merely the heir waiting in the wings, but a figure prepared to act, assert, and defend the institution he will one day lead. It was printed on white, weighty paper, with a subtle gold border and the mark of the Prince of Wales. But for Meghan, the words written in black ink felt far heavier than the paper they were printed on. It was not just the end of a title. The atmosphere inside Meghan Markle's Montecito estate reportedly turned tense the moment her legal team handed her the letter. Though royal correspondence had arrived before, updates, notices, statements, this one felt different. It didn't come with polite language. It wasn't accompanied by a diplomatic call. It was formal, stark, and final. And according to several insiders familiar with what happened next, Meghan Markle did not take the news quietly. One of them described her immediate reaction with two unfiltered words: she lost it. To understand the emotional gravity of that moment, one must remember what the title Duchess of Sussex represented to Meghan. It wasn't just a mark of royalty. It had become a cornerstone of her post-royal identity. It gave weight to her causes, lent prestige to her ventures, and formed the bridge between her past in Hollywood and her present in global activism. Having walked away from the monarchy's responsibilities, the title remained her last thread to the institution that had made her global headline material. Now that thread had been officially severed, and it was Prince William's hand that had done the cutting. When the letter was placed before her, Meghan allegedly sat in silence for a moment, processing the legal wording. Witnesses say her first words were sharp, laced with disbelief. "This is war. He just declared war." Within minutes, she was pacing the room, asking questions no one had immediate answers to. Can they really do this? What about our contracts? What about the speaking tours? What about the memoir? The branding? Is this legal? The first call she made, according to one insider, wasn't to Harry, it was to her lead attorney. Her voice, they claimed, trembled not with sadness, but with rage. The conversation was brief, emotional, and filled with expletives. She instructed her team to prepare for a response and to find any possible route to block the order. As soon as the call ended, she reportedly collapsed into the nearest chair, holding the letter as if it physically pained her to read it again. One assistant who was present claimed she muttered, "He's trying to erase me. He wants me gone." That night, the Markle estate became what one insider later described as a war room. Legal minds, crisis PR experts, media strategists, and personal advisors convened for an emergency meeting in the couple's private boardroom. A digital presentation was hastily prepared, outlining the potential fallout. Meghan's name and title appeared on dozens of slides, from marketing materials to partner contracts, book deals, brand endorsements, and event invitations. The Duchess title had become her signature. Now, they had to consider what it meant to strip that signature away. Inside the room, Meghan reportedly interrupted the presentation halfway through. "Enough," she said, standing abruptly. "I want solutions, not panic." Her voice was commanding, but strained. The rage that had filled the air hours earlier had turned into an icy determination. According to one member of the team, she instructed them to start drafting a statement, not necessarily to release yet, but to be ready. A response that would reclaim the narrative, reaffirm her dignity, and, if necessary, challenge the royal family on legal grounds. But Harry's entrance into the room that evening marked a shift. According to accounts from within the estate, he appeared tired, emotionally heavy, and deeply unsettled. When Meghan showed him the letter, he didn't speak right away. Instead, he stared at it, reading it twice, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, he actually did it. The room reportedly fell silent. Harry didn't raise his voice. He didn't explode like Meghan had. But his sadness, insiders say, was palpable. His relationship with William, already strained to the point of near collapse, had now crossed into something far more permanent. Meghan watched his reaction closely, hoping for a partner ready to fight back. But Harry's posture, his expression, suggested resignation. He knew this had been coming. He had hoped, perhaps foolishly, that William would stop short of actually pulling the trigger. But he hadn't. The couple retreated to their private quarters not long after, but sources say the tension between them was heavy. Meghan felt betrayed, not just by William, but by the institution as a whole. She reportedly paced the bedroom, making calls late into the night to allies, including Oprah Winfrey, one of her most trusted confidants. Her tone was bitter. "He's scared of me," she said, according to one person briefed on the call. "He's scared of what I'll say next." The next morning, things escalated further. Meghan reportedly woke up early, determined to craft her counter-message. According to her media team, she instructed her PR lead to prepare an op-ed for an American outlet, possibly the New York Times or the Atlantic. It wouldn't directly confront the letter, but it would paint a picture: a woman silenced, punished, and erased for daring to speak truth. Meghan wanted to frame it as a feminist story, a racial story, a cultural battle between the old world and the new. But not everyone on her team agreed. Some advisors warned that going too hard too fast might make her appear bitter or defensive. They argued that silence, for now, might generate more public sympathy. Let the palace look cruel. Let the press draw its own conclusions. Then strike. This internal debate reportedly led to another meltdown. Meghan, already feeling cornered, lashed out at her staff. One senior member of the team later resigned quietly, citing stress and philosophical differences with the direction things were heading. In the midst of all this, Meghan reportedly broke down again, this time in private. Witnesses say she spent over an hour alone in her garden, visibly upset, wiping her face repeatedly. The weight of the moment had caught up with her. This wasn't just about a title anymore. It was about identity, power, and being publicly dismissed by a family she had once married into with hopeful optimism. What complicated things further was the news leaking to the press just days later. Once the existence of the letter was confirmed by British tabloids, Meghan's reaction shifted from emotional collapse to crisis response. She reportedly felt that she had been outmaneuvered, that the leak had framed her as stripped of her dignity, and she hadn't even had the chance to defend herself. And yet, she still held back. Her team issued no formal statement, no public comment. But behind the scenes, every move she made was strategic. A sudden increase in social media activity followed. Meghan's charities posted more frequently. Her public engagements were spotlighted with sharper focus. Her name began appearing in think pieces and op-eds across American media outlets, most of them framing her as a victim of a patriarchal, outdated system. It was a subtle counterstrike, one designed to win hearts without igniting further war. But inside, those who knew her said the sting remained. Meghan reportedly confided to friends that the worst part wasn't the loss of the title. It was the sense that her place in history had been rewritten by someone else, that her version of the story was being replaced with theirs. She had once been heralded as the woman who would modernize the monarchy. Now, she was being written out of it. That realization, those close to her say, is what broke her. The letter was just paper, but the message behind it was permanent. She had lost something intangible: recognition, legitimacy, even status in the historical narrative of the royal family. And no amount of podcasts, documentaries, or branding deals could change that. The alleged meltdown wasn't just a moment of rage. It was the sound of a door slamming shut, a reminder that whatever bridge remained between Meghan and the royal family had now burned completely. And standing at the other end of that fire was Prince William, colder than ever, unwilling to look back. For Prince Harry, the title revocation letter that landed in Montecito didn't just shatter the thin veil of civility left between his wife and the royal family. It pierced the last remaining thread connecting him to the life he had once known. It was not unexpected, perhaps, but it was still deeply personal. And what followed, according to those close to the Duke of Sussex, was an emotional unraveling marked by silence, withdrawal, and profound inner conflict. Those who observed Harry during the first 24 hours after the letter arrived noted an uncharacteristic quiet. He didn't erupt like Meghan. He didn't immediately call his father. He didn't pace the grounds or demand meetings with lawyers. He just sat, still, reflective, withdrawn. At one point, a member of staff found him in the private library staring at the same page of a book for over an hour. He reportedly didn't eat for most of that day. This wasn't the reaction of someone shocked by the letter's content. Harry had sensed for weeks, if not months, that the situation was inching toward a final break. He had picked up on William's tone in recent correspondences, short, emotionless, firm. The days when the brothers could have heated exchanges or even arguments had passed. Now, it was cold diplomacy. Formal words. Full stops. No emotion. But knowing something is coming doesn't always make it easier to accept. Harry understood what the letter represented. It was more than just an administrative decision. It was William's personal declaration that Meghan was no longer welcome within the royal fold, not even symbolically. To some in his inner circle, Harry expressed a growing sense of helplessness. One friend, speaking under anonymity, revealed that Harry said, "He's cutting her out like she never existed. Like everything we did meant nothing." The emotional weight of that realization was devastating. Meghan had always been Harry's line in the sand. From the very beginning, he had made it clear to his family, she comes first. He'd walked away from royal duties. He'd endured public scorn. He'd given up military appointments, patronages, and privileges for her. And now, it seemed the institution, and more pointedly, his own brother, was retaliating against her with cold precision. In private, Harry reportedly confessed that the letter felt like a knife. Not because of what it took from us, he allegedly said, but because of who it came from. This sentiment revealed the true heartbreak. While Meghan had long ceased to expect fairness from the palace, Harry had always held out hope, however slim, that his relationship with William could be salvaged. That one day, they would find common ground again. That time would cool tempers, and that maybe their children would know each other. But with that letter, that hope dimmed. Over the following days, Harry went into what those around him described as emotional retreat. He canceled 2 scheduled Zoom meetings for Archwell. He skipped a planned family hike. He didn't leave the house. Instead, he spent most of his time in the garden or holed up in his writing room. Staff said he barely spoke to anyone except Meghan and his therapist. The tension between him and Meghan also reportedly intensified, not from blame, but from sheer emotional overload. Meghan was in action mode, strategy, calls, press management. Harry, on the other hand, was grieving. Their coping styles clashed. She wanted to respond, to fight, to regain control. He wanted to understand, to process, to mourn. One reported exchange between them was brief, but telling. "Meghan, we need to respond." "Harry, what if we don't?" "Meghan, then they win." That difference in perspective led to long, quiet evenings filled with stilted conversations and emotional distance. Not anger, just 2 people reacting differently to the same blow. Eventually, Harry reached out to a former royal staffer with whom he remained close. Their call lasted over an hour. According to sources familiar with the conversation, Harry didn't ask for advice. He didn't ask for intervention. He simply asked, "What happens next?" The answer he received was blunt. Nothing. This was the end of the road. That confirmation struck him harder than he expected. Friends say Harry described feeling like he had been orphaned a second time. Losing his mother, Diana, had left an unhealable wound. But this felt like losing his identity, his history, and his family all over again. The monarchy had not just turned the page on Meghan. It had turned the page on him, too. Yet Harry wasn't entirely blindsided. In the weeks leading up to the title revocation, he had tried reaching out to William, according to a source within their extended circle. There were texts, short, respectful, attempts to keep communication open. One message reportedly read, "There's still a way through this. Let's not escalate." William never replied. That silence haunted Harry more than the letter. At one point, he considered returning to the UK to speak to William in person. He even floated the idea to Meghan, who dismissed it as a trap. But Harry clung to the hope that face-to-face dialogue could somehow break through the stalemate. In the end, advisors on both sides made clear it wouldn't be welcomed. The family's position was firm. There would be no back-channel diplomacy this time. Instead, Harry remained in California, surrounded by people who cared for him, but who couldn't fully understand what it meant to be cut off from a royal legacy. The legacy he had once called his birthright. According to one longtime friend, Harry described the weeks after the letter as a period of silent mourning. He felt the same weight in his chest he'd felt after his military career ended. That same hollow sense of dislocation. The world still spun. His family still loved him. His children were healthy. And yet something essential had died, and no one outside his old life would ever fully grasp what it was. It's important to note that Harry's pain was not about status or power. By all accounts, he had no desire to reclaim royal authority. His departure from working royal life had been voluntary. But what he hadn't anticipated was the emotional toll of having his wife erased from the system that had shaped his very existence. A system that, for all its flaws, had once given his life meaning. The loss of Meghan's title felt to Harry like the monarchy rewriting its story and writing them out entirely. In a quiet conversation with a close American friend, Harry reportedly said, "They'll pretend we were never there. That we never mattered." That statement captured the depth of his despair. But even in his grief, Harry remained protective of Meghan. As criticism mounted online and in the press, he reportedly ordered his team to monitor all media mentions closely. He wanted to know which outlets supported her and which ones skewered her. He instructed his legal team to prepare a watch list of journalists and commentators. He was ready to defend her this time from afar. Internally, however, he battled feelings of impotence. He had spent years defending Meghan from the press, the public, even his own family. But this time, he couldn't stop the blow. The letter had come from the very heart of the monarchy, from William, and there was no counterweight he could summon to reverse it. As days turned into weeks, Harry began to shift. The grief gave way to a kind of resigned clarity. He began working again. He resumed meetings. He spoke more often in public. But those close to him say something fundamental had changed. He spoke less about reconciliation. He no longer brought up William in casual conversation. He stopped calling Charles. His world had contracted, but his focus sharpened. He reportedly told a confidant, "If this is war, then we build something better. Not just for us, for the next generation." That statement marked a turning point. Harry, the prince caught between two worlds, had finally chosen one. It wasn't the palace. It wasn't protocol. It wasn't the past. It was the future, with Meghan, their children, and a legacy they would now write on their own terms. As the storm gathered in Montecito, a conspicuous stillness settled over London. At Buckingham Palace and Kensington alike, the mood was different. Not celebratory, not defensive, but resolved. There was no backtracking, no rushed press statement.